You know, every so often you stumble upon a game which leaves you with a multitude of questions upon completion. These are questions such as, what's going on? Why did that just happen? And of course, what the fuck did I just play? I can say that personally, no other game has raised so many questions for me than Killer7. Released for the GameCube and the PS2 in 2005, this was a moderately successful title, garnering generally average reviews all around. But what's most interesting about this title is the cult following it has garnered over the years. When you bring this game up to most people who have played it, they either respond with joy or with indifference. But what do I think of this title? Well, let's jump right into this madness and find out. This game takes place in an alternate universe in the year 2003. All international disputes have been resolved, nuclear power and weapons have all been disbanded, every terrorist organization in the world has been eradicated, and there is even a bridge connecting the United States to Asia. So, things seem to be going fairly well. That is, until the arrival of a new terrorist threat named Heaven's Smile. This organization is run by a mysterious madman named Kun-Lan. Kun-Lan uses his godlike power known as the God Hand to turn normal people into mindless demons that explode whenever they come into contact with other people. This is where our heroes come in. Say hello to the Killer7. But to explain the Killer7, I must first explain this man, Harmon Smith. Harmon may seem like a feeble old man, but don't be fooled. He holds the power to telepathically control 7 different assassins with his mind. Yeah, you heard me correctly. This single man holds the personas of 7 different assassins inside of his mind. I think this is a good time for a disclaimer. If I point out every aspect of this game that is either entirely crazy or just flat out makes absolutely no sense, we're gonna be here all day. Those of you who have played this game, and most of you who have heard about it, probably already know that this game, not to mention its creator, is a bit eccentric. So you're just gonna have to trust me when I say that all of this madness is in fact in the game, and I'm not losing my mind as I read off the script. With that being said, let's move on to the members of the Killer7. Each member has their own distinct personality and abilities, and most personas can be swapped out at any time. The first member is Garcian Smith. While Garcian is rarely used in combat, he is basically the middleman for the group as he acquires contracts for them to carry out. Now, even though he isn't very combat proficient, he is extremely useful to the team as he is known as the Cleaner. What does this mean? Well, here's the rundown. Whenever one of the personas falls in combat, you can use Garcian to revive them. All you have to do is guide Garcian to the location in which they died, and he will automatically resurrect them. However, keep in mind that if Garcian dies, then there's no one left to recover your teammates. And if there's no one left to recover your teammates, it's game over. The second persona is Dan Smith. Dan is the most aggressive member of the group, and uses a revolver for his weapon of choice. As you progress through the campaign, you'll find that Dan has a fairly interesting backstory, and his special ability is known as the Demon Shot, which is used to kill off specific Heaven Smiles. Persona number 3 is Killer Smith. Killer is the only woman in the group and uses a scoped rifle as her weapon of choice. Her special ability? Well, that's easy. You see, occasionally you will come across an area in which you must reveal a secret passageway to continue your mission. In order to do this, Killer slits her wrists, which showers the area in her blood, which in turn summons the spirit in order to reveal the area in which to proceed. Moving on. The fourth persona is named Kevin Smith. No, not that Kevin Smith, although that would be pretty cool. There's not much to his personality as he never talks, but he is quite effective in combat. Kevin's weapon of choice is throwing knives, thus making him the only member who never needs to reload. As for his special ability, he can turn invisible. I'm serious. All he has to do is take off his sunglasses and this guy is suddenly invisible. This ability is used to get past enemies without them attacking you or bypassing security systems. Persona número 5 es Coyote Smith. Coyote is a former thief, and this aspect is reflected in his special abilities. Coyote can be used to unlock almost any lock, and holds the ability to jump to extreme heights in order to infiltrate certain areas. Like Dan, Coyote also uses a revolver in combat, and is one of the more vicious members of the group due to his upbringing. The sixth persona is Con Smith. Con is a 14-year-old blind kid. Yep, seriously, he can't see a thing. What, after all this craziness, you're not going to believe me when I say this? Well, anyway, he may be blind, but that doesn't stop him from being a valuable asset to the team. Con's specialties are entering small areas that the rest of the team can't, super speed, and super hearing. Con's weapons of choice are dual automatic pistols, which he both fires and reloads extremely quickly. The final persona, number 7, is Mask de Smith. Mask is a former professional wrestler, and as such he is the powerhouse of the group. His weapons of choice are dual-wielded grenade launchers. While this weapon is extremely powerful, it does have the handicap of having to be reloaded after every shot. But I wouldn't worry too much about this, as by the end of the game, Mask becomes one of the most powerful members of the team. And you thought John Cena no-sold everything. Well, now that the main characters are all present and accounted for, let's move on to the gameplay. In each mission, you are tasked with assassinating a different target. In order for you to get to your target, say for a few missions, you must collect a certain amount of soul shells. These soul shells are then used to pay a toll in order to get to your target. Before you ask, I have no fucking idea. Between you, the soul shells, and your target are a plethora of heaven smiles. The combat is fairly straightforward. Once you stumble upon an area in which you hear a heaven smile laugh, you must then scan for the enemies due to the smile's natural camouflage. Once you spot an enemy, you must destroy them before they get too close and explode. With the basic enemies, all you have to do is shoot them anywhere, or on a special critical spot which is found by scanning enemies, to defeat them. However, as you progress through the story, the enemies get very diverse. From enemies which birth out other enemies, to enemies which need to be shot in specific locations in order to kill them, to enemies which must be defeated by certain personae. Once you defeat an enemy, you will drain their blood. If you dismember their limbs first, or kill the enemies by hitting the critical points, you will obtain more blood. But I'm sure you're wondering by now why on earth you need the blood. Well, blood is used for two purposes. As you kill enemies, you gain both thick and thin blood. Thin blood is stored in vials in the pause screen and is used to heal yourself and use the persona's special abilities. Thick blood is used to level up the abilities of the personas. Once you find a safe room in an area, you can access the TV in said room. The TV is used to switch personas, but it can also be used to transform your thick blood into points, which in turn are used to level up the abilities of any persona you choose, be it their power, accuracy, or even in the case of Mask, his damage radius. Now that we've covered the combat, let's talk about the basic maneuvering. Getting around in this game isn't quite as simple as just moving your control stick to move. In fact, this game functions fairly similarly to a rail shooter. In order to move, you must hold down the A button. This will make your character move along the current hallway or street. Once you come to a junction, you may then decide which direction you wish to proceed. If at any time you wish to change your direction, don't worry. All you have to do is press the B button and you will turn around and head back to where you came from. Just keep in mind that while backtracking, the enemies will respawn. After you beat the game the first time, you will unlock a new mode named Killer7. What's so special about this mode? No, nothing much. Actually, who the hell am I kidding? This game mode drastically alters the gaming experience. First off, you gain Harmon as a playable character for the duration of the game. Second, if an enemy hits you, you are killed instantly. Furthermore, the critical weak spots on enemies are now invisible, making some of them impossibly hard to defeat. The amount of thin blood is limited to 5 vials at a time, and it is much harder to obtain thick blood. And finally, all of the puzzles that must be solved are presented in a different fashion. And there are no markers on your map which indicate which persona must be used to proceed. So in short, I like to call this the Fuck You mode. Well, I think that takes care of the major points in the game, so now for the reviewing. As I'm sure you can tell by just looking at this game, this is one of those titles that takes advantage of the cel-shaded style of graphics. Although they're overall quite basic looking, the graphics do lend themselves very well to this style of game. The artsy and occasionally pastel style of environments gives the game an overall dreamy, or even hallucinogenic feel. And honestly, after playing this game, you may start to wonder whether or not you were in fact hallucinating. As for the gameplay, I can't really say I have any problems. Each persona has their own nuances during combat, which greatly expands the possibilities while fighting, along with adding a decent amount of replay value. I will say that the rail shooter style of movement is a bit odd, but it is executed very well, even to the point where after a while, moving around feels very fluid. A very interesting aspect of this game that I noticed while playing was the music. The songs in this game vary from rave music, to blues, to rock, and so much more. These variations all match the environment and greatly enhance the atmosphere. As for the story, well, here's where I have my issues. Now, I know that this game was going for a very surreal feel, from having a man in a gimp suit fall from the sky to give you advice, to fighting a knockoff version of the Power Rangers. But at times, I feel that the story seemed confused on what it wanted to be. There are long stretches where the story is very serious, and then out of nowhere they pop out something completely absurd. Now, I don't mind either of those aspects, but I personally would have preferred more consistency. Another problem I have with the story is that if you don't pay extremely close attention to every little detail of every single thing that's going on, you may miss an entire segment of the plot and even worse, end up really confused regarding the plot twist. Now, to be fair, there is a way to get a much more detailed story. Alongside the game, there was a book released named Handing Killer7, which greatly expands the detail of the story and adds a great amount of backstory to every character, making for a much more coherent narrative. But in the end, this still raises the question of what I think of this game overall. Well, oddly enough, you know what this game reminds me of? Catherine. Mostly in the sense that I felt both that this game, and that one, would have greatly benefited from being an anime rather than a video game. Now, in Catherine, the reason was that the gameplay simply slowed down the fairly interesting narrative. In the case of Killer7, it's quite the opposite. The gameplay is one of the best aspects of this game, but due to the nature of it being a video game, it just didn't have the time span or the ability to cover the whole story. Now, it should be noted that the game's creator, Suda51, has gone on record stating that he feels that this game is his masterpiece. And honestly, I'm glad he takes so much pride in his work. So, maybe the crazy setup of the story was completely intentional, and if he's happy with his work, who am I to rain on his parade? So, if you like what you've heard about this game and want to give it a try, then I have 2 free pieces of advice for you. First off, think of this game as more of an adventure title rather than a shooter. The combat is in fact in FPS mode, however the exploration, puzzle solving, and item gathering make this game operate much more like an adventure game. The second piece of advice I have to give is, if you're ever feeling confused regarding the plot or madness of this game, just remember this quote: "Nothing is true, everything is permitted." Yes, I did just use that line. And yes, it's perfectly relevant here. So until next time, this has been E-Dog saying, man, it's good to be back. See you next time.